Yay!
I'm ready.
Adjusting the microphone. I realize I want to cut you off guard. Hi, everybody. Welcome to Ginger Runner Live, episode number 286. Excited about tonight's show because we have a guest on that probably has been one of the most requested guests since her appearance last on the show.
And in fact, I've had multiple people texting me after her last appearance saying that they wanted her back.
Everyone's like wants her contact info, and I feel like she's had a pretty good return on people who watched that episode and followed up with her to find out more on how they can adjust their nutrition needs and sort of adjust their outlook on food and that sort of thing. Maria Dalzot is going to join us again on the show tonight. She is a registered dietitian who, on her last appearance, schooled us on ways to look at food in a better way. And it's one of those guests and one of those shows that I look back on. I'm like, this is helpful, not only to myself and Kim and like how we look at food and process food every day, but our viewing audience just loved the outlook. And, you know, all food is good food, essentially. And we can't wait to talk to her more tonight on how to approach the holidays and eating with a little bit less stress. Because let's be honest, the holidays have enough stress as it is.
True.
You throw food and our preconceived notions of what we can eat, what we should eat, what we should avoid, overeating, all of those things. We're going to talk about on tonight's show with a registered dietitian who we've had on the show before. She's fantastic, Maria Dalzot. So sit back, relax, everyone. Ginger Runner Live, episode number 286 begins now. Ginger Runner. Yay! What is up, everybody? Welcome to Ginger Runner Live, episode number 286. Thank you for taking some time out of your busy Mondays to spend a little bit of it with us. I'm your host, Ethan Newberry, and I'm joined by you.
Just nailing it after 286 times. What's up, you guys? Kim Tashima Newberry here, joining Ethan, as always. If you're new to the show, welcome. We are live. We'll be bringing our guest Maria on in just a second. And because we are live, you guys get to ask our guest questions.
Yeah.
So if you guys have questions for Maria throughout the show, just pop them into the chat room. That is where I will be.
I'm excited about tonight's show because, as I mentioned there in the pre-show, our guest tonight, Maria Dalzot, was probably one of our most requested return guests. She was on our show earlier this summer, right before the Mount St. Helens 50K. I remember talking to her about that. Was it right before?
I think so, because I think we were talking about
it was
if Maria didn't return from the start, that we would all go out and find her.
She returned. We'll catch up a little bit with her on that. But she is a registered dietitian, and when she came on the show last, it really helped us change our outlook on food, and we just scratched the surface of that conversation. So since that episode, we've had a lot of viewers who have been like, we love Maria, you got to bring her back on the show. And Maria's like, I've got this great conversation about holiday eating, and I'm like, this is perfect, because I think I have always looked at the holidays as a place and a time to binge on the things that I really like, which are sweets and desserts. But then also every time I do, I feel really guilty about it. I need to, I've always had this mindset of like, if I eat a lot on Thanksgiving, I got to work out a lot the weekend after. That sort of like balance of you eat a lot, you work out a lot. And there's some unhealthy tendencies in there.
Yeah, there's also that big push of like, gotta run your turkey trot in the morning if you want to have your pie at night. Right. So I think we'll probably talk about that type of
earning your food.
Yes.
You know, the whole dialogue there. And Maria's she's a mind-opening conversation just in regards to that and how to look at our food. So tonight is going to be a fantastic episode. I can't wait. Get your questions ready for Maria. Of course, at the top of every episode, we do have some individuals that we like to thank, and they are the reason that we're able to do these live shows every Monday, reviews, films, everything. And that is our Patreon crew. If you go to patreon.com/thegingernunner for as little as $1 a month, you get to participate in a lot of behind-the-scenes stuff. We do our after shows after every Ginger Runner Live with our guests, and they get to interact with our guests on a more intimate level, which is really fantastic. And tonight, I'll mention this, Maria also is providing a discount code just for Patreon supporters to get her expertise in their lives. She has like a whole printout sheet that we're going to be giving people basically a lot of information and discounts and stuff. Maria's just hooking the crew up. 3 individuals of that Patreon crew at that top tier are just fantastic individuals we'd like to shout out at the beginning of every Ginger Runner live episode. Brian Sands, longtime supporter, really, really wonderful human, very inspiring, ran his first marathon a couple years ago, ran his first 50K, and is just constantly training for big challenges and taking them on head on. He's been a huge part of the trail running scene across the nation now, and just a wonderful human. Rick Bjarnason and his team at cheekymonkeymedia.ca. They are a web design company. They redid the gingerrunner.com website, and they're always available to help you with yours, no matter how big or small your website might be. But Rick's an ultra runner himself, real stand-up dude, badass athlete, so it's awesome to have them on board. And finally, Chris Lee out of Hong Kong, who showcases the trails in the Hong Kong region through an organization called Trailblazer. And Chris has just been a longtime supporter, and he's doing some really fantastic things with the trail running scene in Hong Kong. So shout out to those 3 individuals. Thank you guys so much for all of the support. I think we're ready to get into this.
I think we're ready, and our guest looks ready as well.
She's been so patient. So patient. Without further ado, I'd like to welcome back to the show one of our favorite guests in recent memory, Maria Dalzot. Yay! Hi!
Hi!
Welcome back!
Thank you. Thank you so much. Gosh. You left me speechless. Such nice work. Thank you.
Well, that's it. That's our show. We appreciate it.
Happy Thanksgiving, everyone.
Yeah, happy Thanksgiving. Hope you learned a lot. So since we last had you on, let's just talk first about what you've been up to, because there's been a lot of travel in your life. You were representing Team USA. You traveled South America, Europe, I believe, across the globe this summer and this whole year. So it's been a really big year for you. Right after the last time we had you on the show, you went and ran the Mount St. Helens 50K, volcanic 50K. What was that like? Because I know that you were a little nervous going into it. You had a bad experience the year before. How did it turn out?
I'm happy to report I'm alive. So, yay!
Yay!
No, it was a much better experience mentally. I went into it with a much more positive mindset, and I'm happy to report that I didn't let the anxiety monsters get to me. So it was a really fun race. I actually met some of the GR crew that were there. So
cool.
It was really great. Didn't get stung. A lot of successes came from that race, a lot of growth. So that was a really fun race. So, and then after that, I took, I think I had a week home, and then I flew over to Europe, and then I ran a race in Switzerland, and then I did the sister race of UTMB, the OCC, at the very end of August.
How did that all go? I mean, that's a lot of travel. It's a lot of big races to cram in there. A lot of big
races. It all went, I can best describe my year as solid. Like, I had consistent training. I feel like my performances didn't quite reflect my training, but they were by no means bad. I just feel like my potential is still yet to manifest itself given the training that I've had. So everything has been a really positive experience, and so I'm really grateful for that. But and after Europe, I was on the US team that was down in Mexico for the North American Mountain Running Championship, and that was, again, a wonderful experience. Anytime you have the opportunity to don the U.S. jersey is one of the highest honors for an athlete. So, again, that was really special. And our team won the women won the gold, and we had the first female and male winner. So that was really special. And then I came home, and I just finished a huge training block for my final race of the year, which is a 50-miler on December 7th. And then after that, I'm taking the rest of the year off, and I'm very, very excited for a break.
I can imagine.
A great year. I mean, basically, Tiger Claw kicked it off. Like, ever since Tiger Claw, because before Tiger Claw, I didn't even think I was going to race this year, because I had knee problems. I had all this, like, wonky stuff going on, and then, like, Tiger Claw turned it all around, and then we were kind of off with it. So I'm ready for a break.
I can't believe that I am the reason that you had such a great year.
It's true.
No, like, honestly,
You're so humble.
So
you
humble.
Never take credit for things you shouldn't take credit for.
No, never. But honestly, this is really, really great to hear, Maria, that you had such a successful year, because you're such a standout athlete. You're so strong. And to see you do so well, not just on home turf, but internationally, and to don the U.S. jersey, I can only imagine what that must feel like for you. And I know that you're just coming off of a really big block, 4 weeks with 90 plus miles. I know you're training for that 50 miler. Can you remind us what the 50 miler is so we can follow along?
Yeah, it's the Anza Borrego Cuyamaca 50 miler, or the ABC 50. It's the inaugural year, and it's east of San Diego. So it actually is a point to point. It starts in the mountains of San Diego, and then it's actually a net downhill course that ends in the desert of Anza Borrego. So it should be pretty cool.
I've raced out there before,
Oh,
and gorgeous. This time of year, it's amazing because you're not dealing with heat. You get to get up to the high country Cuyamaca Peak, and you have the views of the high desert. Is breathtaking.
I'm excited. Yeah. I'm really excited. Yeah.
And everything's super runnable too. That's you train in the Northwest, where runnable is, you put quotes on it because you never really know.
It's relative, right? Yeah.
Yeah, it's all relative. But down there, it's just beautiful, beautiful trails that with views that go on forever. I want to talk, since we have a registered dietitian here on our show, Maria's going to be dropping some major knowledge tonight, talking about holiday food and stuff like that. But I wanted to maybe slowly progress into that conversation by talking, because you traveled so much this year. And we talked a little bit about it on the last time we had you on, just regarding what sort of foods you like to eat, or are you vegetarian or plant-based, all that sort of stuff we talked about on the last episode. What is it like to travel so much as someone who works with food on a regular basis and talks with people and their clients about food on a regular basis? Are you challenged when traveling abroad with your food choices and keeping well nourished before races and around races? Was that a challenge that you faced this summer?
Not this summer, no. When we go to Europe, Europe's pretty, it's not a high risk area. There's a lot of food available. You're not in a situation where you have to be weary of drinking the water, and this is our, gosh, maybe 5th year in a row of going to Europe, and so we kind of know the ins and outs, where to get food. Sorry, you guys still there?
Yeah, we're still here.
Sorry, my computer went black for a second and my heart stopped. So
I saw your heart stop.
Oh, I know, it's beating again. Thank goodness. So, but no, going to Europe, I'm not, you can eat pretty quote unquote normally, what you typically do day to day. Now, when we went to Mexico, that's when the whole water and fresh fruits and vegetables come into play. And I knew going into it that I was going to not eat any fruits and vegetables for, however many days I was there. It was like 4 days. Mm-hmm. And I knew that we had to not drink the water. And so in order to make that easier, and this was a trick I learned from one of the runners on the senior US team when I was on the junior team. She brought a squeeze bottle. Like you have a regular drinking bottle, and then you have a squeezy top bottle, and that's for like brushing your teeth so you don't dump like all the water out. And so we have like separate water containers, and just being really mindful of that, because it's so easy to just turn on the tap and start drinking or using it, putting it in your mouth. And so having that awareness, and also just packing stuff like trail butter. I packed tuna, you can get bread. So just eating really simply, and knowing that you're only there for that short a time, you're going to be fine. Like, even though I didn't eat any fruits and vegetables, I was fine. You don't have to worry about getting in any kind of nutrient deficiency for that short period of time. So the best advice, I think, when traveling is to relax. And if you eat as simply and as normal as possible, but if you're eating really bland for, leading up to a race, it's okay. If you're concerned, take a multivitamin, but you don't need to get worked up about it. There's enough things to stress about with logistics and traveling. So just knowing that for a short period of time of traveling, you're going to be okay.
That's solid advice for sure. I think it's also a great transition into the talk about the holidays, like the dovetailing on in there, because food around the holidays. So as I mentioned a little bit at the top of the show, or in the pre-show there, holidays for me are immediately triggering in so many different facets of food, because I look at the amount of food that I'm going to consume during the holidays, and it it scares me. So I try to compensate with an overabundance of exercise or long miles or big challenges, like, oh, I'm going to run a 50K on Saturday for no reason other than to like feel good about myself after eating whatever I eat on Thursday. What are the most common types of, I guess, thoughts like this that you have encountered in your dealings with clients and stuff? Is this common? Am I alone? And how do you help people cope with them?
Yeah, so that's a big one. Like, what am I going to do being surrounded by all this food 24/7, or I'm fears of losing control or eating too much or gaining weight, and then there's this um, um, conditions that we set for ourselves, which is what you described earlier on, where we can only eat a certain food if we, run X amount of miles or if we compete in that turkey trot. And so, well, the reason that this food is so charged, or the reason that around this time of year people are so worked up about it, is that we temporarily give ourselves permission to eat this food one time of year, whereas the rest of the year it's restricted. And so if we know that we are only giving ourselves this temporary permission to eat this food one time of year, we're going to go crazy. This is my one day. I'm going to eat it all now, because starting tomorrow, starting January 1st, starting whenever, it's going to be taken away. And so we got to get as much of it in now, regardless of how it makes you feel, because there's that restriction. And so what I want to challenge everyone to do, or encourage you all to do, is not make plans for future restrictions, which means don't make plans to diet on January 1st. Don't make plans to run extra miles. Stick with what your coach gives you. Stick with what feels good to you. Because the second that you remove that threat of deprivation, you're going to be able to eat in a calm and sane way. Because when we set up all of these rules and restrictions, it just sets up to go crazy around food. And so when we remove that threat, we're able to more mindfully regulate our intake of food. And by giving ourselves permission to eat all kinds of food throughout and what I work with, let me back up a bit. One big concept that I work with people all year round is giving themselves permission to eat all different kinds of foods all year round. And so that way, when we get to the holidays, which is like the Olympics of food, it doesn't feel that different, because people can give themselves permission to eat. If you want pumpkin pie any time of year, you can make pumpkin pie. It doesn't have to be relegated to this one day of year. And what that does is that permission to say yes to all foods gives you permission to say no. And that means, say you're done with your Thanksgiving meal and you're feeling full, you're feeling, my grandma's pumpkin pie, it's so good and I want it and this is my day, I gotta stuff it in there. Rather than doing that and feeling terribly sick and then compensating and making it up during your run tomorrow, you can say, you know what, I'm full, I can eat that pie tomorrow. I can get the recipe, I can make it next week. Hell, I can make it in June. I can make it anytime I want. That food is always accessible to me, right? And another way of thinking about that, and just one more point before I forget it, that's a very binary way of thinking. You're assuming that, and I'm saying the collective you, we're going to go crazy because we're exposed to all these rich and maybe forbidden foods, but you can still eat salad. You can still have fruits and vegetables. This, it's not this black or white binary way of thinking. All of these foods are available to you. It doesn't have to be chaos. It doesn't have to be one or the other. You can still eat the foods that you eat on a regular day, in addition to these special foods that may appear only once a year.
So that's got to be one. I love this. I love the idea of allowing food to not be cordoned off to this 30-day period between the end of November and the end of December. That's a challenge. So how can someone, the way I see it is like, I love pumpkin pie, right? So I want pumpkin pie year round. How can you get into that mindset? Because I think that's probably the biggest challenge, is for me in the middle of July to acknowledge that pumpkin pie can be made in July. I think, is there any steps that we can take on an individual basis to our listeners and viewers where they can embrace this type of food for the rest of the year? Like, that's just a mental hurdle that we have to get over. Is there a way that we can sort of do that?
And it might not be pumpkin pie in July. It might be that you have a favorite ice cream place store that you like to go, after dinner and go for a walk. And maybe there's a nice seating area or whatever. There's this nice ambiance, and you like to go get ice cream. That's one of my favorite things to do. It can be whatever the different environments, different situations spring an interest in eating these different foods. And so it starts with giving yourself permission, because when it's conditional and you only give yourself permission to eat certain foods, and the example that I can think of is and this happened when I was in college, and this is an example of disordered eating. I would refrain from all desserts until after a race. And so after a race, I would kind of go crazy. I would just eat obscene amounts of dessert. And it got to the point where I remember we were running at Penn State College, and there was a Ben & Jerry's there. And we didn't have Ben & Jerry's in Morgantown, West Virginia. And so I literally was thinking about the Ben & Jerry's more than I was thinking about the race. It was crazy. And so then after the race was over, and then I'd go and I'd eat so much I'd feel sick, but then not again until the next race. And so as I grew out of that and finally gave myself permission to actually eat ice cream when I wanted it, I was able to enjoy it so much more, because on days when I designated as giving myself permission to want it, half the time I didn't even want it. And it was, again, that was the rule that I had to stick to. And so it's reminding ourselves, what do I really want right now, and what's really satisfying to me, and is this going to add to my life, or is this going to take away? And these are just kind of internal cues that we have to keep reminding ourselves.
I want to talk about some of these arbitrary rules, like the things that we put in place for ourselves, whether it's ingrained in our own mindsets from being raised a certain way or from childhood habits, that sort of thing, how we can sort of tackle those. Before we do, of course, Kim has been pulling some wonderful live questions here. So let's get to some of those while we have them. Go ahead, Kim.
Yeah, just a general question from Amber in the chat room. Amber says, I'm wondering more about Maria's services. Is she open to everyone, like my mom, perhaps, who is not an athlete but has questions?
Absolutely. Everybody. I don't know. They're definitely not just athletes, especially people who are ready to give up the diet mentality and are ready to become more intuitive eaters and are ready to take back control and make peace with food again. So yes, everybody.
Go ahead and do another one.
Yeah, a question from Kim in the chat room. Kim says, Maria, are there any better choices for holiday treats, or basically is it anything goes?
The problem with, the healthy alternatives, which we're just bombarded with so many of those, it's another form of restriction. That's all it is. It's guised as wellness. But it's the same thing. If you have, I don't know, I can't think of an example, a healthified version of something, it's still a form of restriction, so that when you do eat the real version of whatever it is, it can still elicit feelings of guilt or shame. And so rather than having the quote unquote healthy alternative or making swaps or whatever, eat what's there. Eat what whoever spent the time and energy preparing for you. It could be a special meal that's special just for your family. It could be traditional. Enjoying that and thinking not just what this food is going to do to you, but how is this food going to make you feel? How is this, part of your culture? How is this part of your holiday tradition? So I think people get so caught up on, how can I make this healthier? We lose touch with the original meaning of why we're even eating the food in the first place.
The first thing that comes to mind, I was looking at recipes just last night because I'm making the dessert for my family's Thanksgiving. Of course, I'm making the dessert. It's the one thing that I was like, I got to make the dessert. That's what I want. And I was looking through recipes, and most of the recipes I found were like vegan, gluten-free, no bake. Like the way that they were describing it were fitting into these
vegan, dairy-free,
gluten-free, no bake. There's all these trends. I don't want to call, plant-based or veganism a trend, but it's certainly like buzzwords that people are finding these recipes and things online much quicker, much easier. Is it important to abide by these sorts of things? Is it important to, like, when I find a recipe like that, dissect it and try to think about what is it that I really want to create? Is there a healthy way to go about searching for recipes and creating things that don't dig into our own biases or diet culture or any of that sort of thing?
I mean, my advice would be to make it, eat it. If you like it, great. That's simple. If it tastes like shit, don't eat it. Throw it away. Get another one. There's a bajillion recipes out there. So we don't have to, we're just overthinking it. Sometimes those ingredients are really hard to find. Sometimes they're really expensive. And so we also have to be practical about it. So if you don't want to go buy vegan butter, don't buy freaking vegan butter. Buy real butter. Buy something that you and your family are actually going to use so you're not wasting money and you like it. One of the saddest moments of Tad's life, he was so excited to get a Reese cup, and we went to the co-op, and they have those like homemade Reese cups, and he brought it home and was just getting ready to dig into it, and then was so like disheartened to find out that it was made out of tofu. And I don't think I've ever seen him so sad. Like, it was just we think about it all the time, and we make sure everything is like properly labeled before we bring it home, and so there's no tears.
The tofu tears, they're the worst. Yeah. As someone who eats tofu on a regular basis, this isn't chicken, it's tofu. Just cry myself to sleep. All right, so I'm gonna lay out a scenario that I anticipate will happen in my household, or at least to me on Thursday. But you get to.
I'll protect you.
I appreciate that. Kim is my watchdog for sure. You get to a family setting. You get to a comfortable setting. You're surrounded by friends, family. You all have brought delicious dishes of food. It's time to load up the plates. My instinct has always been to just load up the plate because there's just such a surplus of food, and it's all delicious, and it all tastes good. And like, hell, might as well just fill that plate up with just gargantuan amounts of food. Is there a way that we should be doing this that maybe is a healthier way of approaching large settings like this, where you are surrounded by friends, family, and you don't want to be judged for taking like a single spoonful of mashed potato, that sort of thing? How can we approach it?
And it's also a really distracting environment too. So the advice that I have for that is to think before you go, to actually, just as we do for races, how we visualize how we want races to go. We visualize when we're going to start feeling bad, when we have to start pushing, when we're going to take it easy. I recommend visualizing how you want to feel before, during, and after your meal. And actually taking the time beforehand to think through the scenario. Because the thing about these family dinners or these parties, these holiday get-togethers, they're often very predictable. Some of us have been going to the same holiday get-together for 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 years. So we know the food that's going to be there. We know the people that are going to be there. And so it's a fairly predictable situation. And so what you can do is before you go, think through as thorough as you can what you expect might happen. So, for example, I'm not going home for Thanksgiving, but I'm going home for Christmas. And so for Christmas, we have the Feast of the Seven Fishes. We're Italian. It's a lot of food. And so I picture myself in line. I have my plate. I'm going to fill up my plate. It's going to be full. It's going to be filled with all these wonderful food, all of the different seven fishes that we do only get once a year. But I know I'm also going to have salad, and we're probably going to have like Brussels sprouts or something like that I also really enjoy. And then I'm going to sit at the table, and I'm going to mindfully eat it, which means I'm going to slow the fork down. I'm not going to be filling up my fork before I am done chewing. I'm going to be engaging with my grandmother, who's in her 90s. So I'm going to be, interacting with the people around me and not in my own head thinking, I shouldn't be eating this, or how much am I going to run tomorrow? And at the end of the meal, I'm probably going to feel full. I'm not going to feel sick, but I'm probably going to feel full. My stomach's going to be distended. I might have to unbutton my pants, but I don't want to feel like I need to be rolled out of there. And so that's my game plan. It's realistic, it's predictable, and it gives you the forethought so that before you head into the arena, if you will, you'll have kind of an idea of how you want to feel before, during, and after.
I've actually never even thought of it that way, as like preparation for a race, or you go into these different scenarios where you, specifically that race analogy is fantastic, because now I'm looking at Thursday as like, okay, listen, you eat regular, beautiful meals every day of your life, multiple meals a day. Why treat this one any different? Why not approach it with like a plan? So when I'm looking at that plate, is there a way to fill that plate in a way? Should we be looking at our plate differently as far as how much proteins and carbs and vegetable? Like, is there a way to look at it in a healthy and meaningful way that isn't, I want a plate full of mashed potatoes and I want to,
But what if I do want?
But what if I do? Well, like, right? How is there a way to look at the plate?
You do. What if you do want to mashed potatoes? That's all right, And the thing about it is, when we think of the concept of balance, that's a buzzword we hear all the time. Everything has to be balanced. It's not every meal has to be balanced. Not every day has to be balanced. It's not like your body all of a sudden resets once the clock hits midnight. Balance is something that occurs over multiple days, weeks, months, years. And so if you have one meal of mashed potatoes, enjoy it. That's not going to do diddly squat for your health or your nutrition. It's not going to affect it, right? You're probably going to want something other than mashed potatoes for your next meal, in which you would have more variety. So honestly, I wouldn't worry about it.
I mean, Courtney Dauwalter has run 200, 300 miles on just mashed potatoes.
She's doing just fine.
She's alive and kicking.
What were you going to say?
What was I going to say? Oh, any tips on how to address the conversations that will likely come up, that we've had come up at family and friend get-togethers of, say, your cousin or whoever walks up to you and says, "Oh, like you're a runner, you must eat healthy. I just started this keto diet. What do you think about that?" Or I watched this documentary on Netflix and now I'm not eating this, I'm not eating this, I'm not eating this. Is there a way to address people that want to engage in that type of conversation during the holidays?
And unfortunately, that kind of diet talk is rampant over this time of year. As I mentioned earlier, it's like the Olympics of eating, and more so, it's because so many topics, when you come together with a group of people that, it's your family, you might not have seen them in a long time. They might be people who don't share the same values as you do. And so things like politics and religion are kind of off the table subjects. And so what appears as a perceived safe topic is diet talk, or what diet are you going to go on the new year? What are you on? And so it can be really triggering, especially for those who are working on their relationship with food, and it can almost feel like a setback or just kind of a real downer, right? It really bums me out when someone's talking about how just how bad they're being, or what they have to do to amend how much they've eaten. And so, but what happens is that sometimes it's easier to just go along with that talk and just kind of nod along. But what needs to happen is you need to be a circuit breaker. You need to break that chain of reaction. So that's what's common, or people kind of talking about that. But what you can do is turn the situation into something more positive. So if, for example, if somebody's talking about, the example I always use are like, we have raviolis at Easter. It's really special. We make them once a year, homemade. And if we eat too many raviolis, they're so rich, they're so whatever. Someone beside you talking that way, you can be like, "Oh, well, I think they're really delicious. I would like to have the recipe. I would like to learn how to make these. Maybe we can make them together sometime." Or, "Why is it that you feel bad about that? Why does this make you feel like you need to run so much?" And it's a way to kind of stop people in their tracks and actually think about why they're having the thoughts they are, and it maybe make them confront some fears they have, some fat phobia that they might have that they've never kind of brought to the surface before. But you're also modeling the behavior that you want to see. And so talking in ways that foods can be celebrated rather than diet shaming and talk like that. So again, you're being that circuit breaker. And again, it's a predictable situation. We all have that, that awkward uncle who says inappropriate things, or the opinionated aunt, or, if you haven't seen your mom in a long time and if she comments on your body size, how can you combat that? Well, you can set boundaries, and it can be really hard to be assertive, but letting people know how their comments make you feel. And it might sound awkward or clumsy. It might make them feel awkward and clumsy, but their comment was awkward and clumsy. And so just bringing it to their attention, if someone comments on, your body size, say, you know what? I feel strong and healthy. I'm eating in a way that makes me feel good. I'm eating in a way that makes me feel really strong when I'm running. I'm not really worrying about what food's going to do to me. I'm worrying about how it makes me feel. Done. So stopping it right there, and then you can decide how you want to engage with it. And I think that's the biggest takeaway, is that even though this conversation is going on, you can be in charge. You can decide how you want to engage, whether you want to be assertive and tell people how it's making you feel, whether you want to be more passive about it and just change the subject, or you can set up an internal boundary. And again, using the race situation, we talk about mantras a lot on this show.
Mm-hmm.
I think a question you ask a lot of people is, what's your mantra? And you can even come up with mantras that will help redirect your thoughts, or kind of take you away from the conversation that's going on, because you don't have to believe everything that they're talking about. You're not a sponge that has to, take everything that they're saying for truth. And so one of the mantras that I like is, that doesn't serve me. It could be a conversation about politics. It could be a conversation about food, but that doesn't serve me. And that's my internal boundary. That's my cue that maybe I need to go to the bathroom. Maybe I need to go outside for a second. Maybe I need to excuse myself. And another one, food related, is food is just food. And when you're, questioning the morality, is this good or bad? That mantra, food is just food, can help you disconnect those two thoughts so that you can eat in a way that is without judgment. So, and I know that's a lot that I've just kind of thrown at you. And what I did is I made a handout with kind of, with an example of some of these mantras and some of these little tips and tricks that I made for everyone watching. And I actually made it so that you can download a JPEG and it can be the background on your computer screen. So you can have it up throughout the holidays, just kind of in the background there to refer to. So I have that, and I have a printable version of the tips, as well as a color version that all you have to do is subscribe to my newsletter, and I'll get that to you Tuesday or Wednesday, and then once a week until the holidays are through. So, because I know that's a lot.
I found myself, while you were answering that, like sitting there and nodding, because I'm also playing out the conversations that are going to take place on Thursday. Like, I know there's going to be this person that talks about how keto has changed their life, and there's going to be this person that's talking about how it played the opposite effect. And like, I can already see these conversations playing out. And what I gathered from what you just said was so beneficial, because it really can be about self-health. You can be selfish with your own health, in the sense that you can set up your own boundaries. You can acknowledge other people's relationships with food and where they're at in their journey, without having to sacrifice anything that maybe you're trying to get a grasp on, and that sort of thing. I think just the idea of self-health is beautiful during the holidays, because it is such a trying times in so many different ways, and family dynamics and stuff like that, and with food. And it's important to like give yourself grace, and put yourself on a higher pedestal, right? Rather than just let yourself be berated, or fall down that rabbit hole of a weird relationship with food and stuff like that. I'm loving everything that I'm getting out of the show so far. I knew I would. Live questions, Kim. What do we got?
Yeah, this is kind of a comment in the chat room, and I have a question to kind of go along with it. So Ingen in the chat room, regular viewer, says, finally made it tonight listening on headphones so my kids don't pick up on language about foods being considered bad. Do you have any tips for parents? during the holidays, like dealing with the kids. And Ethan and I were talking about this the other day about our childhoods and what holidays are like and what eating was like. And I was saying that, my parents were very strong on not bringing us up in the clean your plate club. They were kind of like, they fed us healthy, as healthy as they could, but they were kind of like, eat what you want. And
Right.
I also had relatives that were very like, you need to eat and everything that's on your plate. And I've kind of seen the result of what has happened from that type of thinking as well. And I think you had different experience as well growing up.
Yeah, it like all that influence from loading up a plate during childhood, and I did have that sort of clean your plate club, like what you were served, you had to finish. Because it's good food. So why would you let it go to waste? Or, you'd be punished if you let food go to waste, that sort of thing. So yeah, I think it's a great question from Ingen, is how can parents bring this sort of stuff up around the holidays, or should they with kids?
I think, kids are really smart and they pick up on nuances. And I think more than what you say, it's what you do. And so, and again, I think I talked a little bit about this on the last show, but I'm always quick to call out people who use language like good or bad, because food is neither bad and it's not good either. I think, Ethan, you mentioned at the beginning of the show, all food is good. Well, all food is not good. It's not good. It's not bad. It's neutral. And so it's completely taking away this hierarchy of foods. And so what I always recommend to parents is to approach food in a neutral way. Dessert is just part of the meal. It's not a bribe to get kids to eat, finish their plate or whatever. And it's the excitement, it's the, the thrill that's linked to that food is what makes it so sought after, so wanted. I mean, think about kids who, there are parents that are like, oh, we don't keep that stuff in the house. We don't let our kids have this. And then what happens is that when the kid goes to a friend's house, who the friend is allowed to have all these treats, they go crazy, right? Again, it's another example of how restriction causes binging. And that's just a very, a very specific example of that happening. Anytime we have, it doesn't matter how old you are, any type of restriction can lead to this feeling of being out of control because you don't know when it's going to come again. And I used to always say that it's kind of the Last Supper mentality, like, oh, this is it. I better eat it all now. And I always talk about it. And then Tad, my husband, was like, you know what, Last Supper isn't a really good visual. He's like, I just think of Jesus and the apostles. And so we started thinking about it, and we started thinking about the first Thanksgiving. And if you think about it, the first Thanksgiving, they got together for this big feast before the famine of the winter. And so they did eat like they weren't going to eat for a long time. And so if you think about it, we've kind of held on to that Thanksgiving mentality for 399 years now. The 400th Thanksgiving is going to be next year, the anniversary of Thanksgiving. So it's kind of bizarre when you think about it, that day 399 years ago, we're still approaching it the same way.
It's fascinating. I mean, even just thinking back to I feel like this is really common, and it goes one of two ways. I was raised, my parents really tried to keep healthy food around the house. They wanted to be good parents and provide healthy food, right? I'm putting the quotes on these things because both are relative.
Right.
And as an adult, and I remember going to kids, like my friends' houses as a kid and being like, oh my God, they have Fruit Loops. Like, I would never be allowed Fruit Loops. I'm like, I want a third bowl of Fruit Loops if that's okay.
Yeah.
And now as an adult, it's like, obviously you get to eat whatever you want. But I had friends on the opposite side of the spectrum who would grow up with the Fruit Loops. And now as an adult, they're like, man, all I crave is grape nuts. Like, I just want the healthiest, grossest cereal. Again, putting quotes on that. But like, it's so interesting to see both sides of that spectrum. But I found myself nodding when you were describing that because I feel like that's really common. As kids were either raised with the health foods, the things that the parents thought was, this is going to raise my kid right. And then they binge as an adult, right? It creates that.
And the parents are well-intentioned. It's coming from well-meaning, but just being mindful of how you talk around food. If you don't like green beans, don't be like making faces at the green beans, because the kids are going to see that and they might not have even tried the green beans but think they don't like it. And so being mindful of the way that you talk, not only about food but about your body, because kids pick up on that too. Making comments about, oh, I shouldn't eat that, kids pick up on that from a very, very young age, and that's where their relationship starts with food. And so that's what I would be mindful of, is what are you saying to yourself in front of your kids? So even if you're not directing it toward them, it's a message that they're taking in as well. So being careful calling out foods as good or bad, and just being careful of body talk. And I've been talking a lot about potential negative comments about our bodies, and I also want to talk a little bit about, what if you mean well by complimenting somebody? Oh, you look great, have you lost weight? And Kim, you mentioned, oh, you're a runner, you look great, you look like a runner. So what that means for the person who's receiving the compliment is that my body is better now than it used to be. It wasn't good enough back then, but now it's better, so that if I ever stop becoming a runner, it's not going to be as good as it used to be. So that's number one, why you shouldn't do it. Number two is that you could be reinforcing disordered eating behavior, or somebody who has an eating disorder. You are saying to them, yes, this is working. And so that's a huge reason not to comment somebody on their body size, even if it's well-intentioned. Somebody could be sick and we don't know. They could be going through something really invasive like chemotherapy. We might not know these people. We might not have seen them for years. So we don't really know what's going on in the background. And lastly, they could be grieving. This is a really hard time. And so they could have just lost a loved one. It could be their first holiday away from this loved one. And so they might not be eating as a response to grief. And so I think that's really important to keep in mind. And the good news is that there are so many other compliments that we can give each other, that we can celebrate, there's so many other ways that we can connect with people, other than food or politics or religion. We just might have to get a little creative, and that might be the biggest challenge.
I feel like there's so many rabbit holes and great conversations that we can have about a lot of this the conversation. I am hoping that it's a lot to take in, and it's a lot of sort of reprogramming. And reprogramming is probably one of the most difficult things for people to do, to acknowledge, okay, maybe here's something, maybe it's a problem, or maybe it's just a behavioral thing, and taking the steps to help alter that. Because a lot of this, like I said, is self-health and things that we can do with our relationship with food. And especially around the holidays, we're going to be taking that into a public place, whether it's with family or with friends.
Mm-hmm.
Are there some quick things, rather than taking in like, here's all the different things that we need to do to our approach to food and like our plate and that sort of thing, is there any way to sort of distill down what we've kind of talked about today, even just like an initial thing that someone who maybe is listening or watching this can just implement on Thursday in the simplest ways to sort of help themselves with what might occur at that feast?
I think the biggest takeaway would be take time beforehand. Take time to visualize, take time to go through the predictable scenarios, take time to think about who's going to be triggering, who you might, not want to spend a lot of time with. You can set those boundaries. And so that's what I would do, is you can journal it out, you can think about it, but I would definitely take the time to visualize, think about how you want to feel before, during, and after, what you're hoping to come away from the experience feeling like. And I think that would be the biggest takeaway for sure.
Brilliant. Like, that I think is the easiest way. I know that's exactly what I'm going to do before Thursday. It's just self-assess. Just take a moment for myself before even entering through that front door and being like, here's my plan, and trying to stick to that plan.
Because if you think about all the, like, going back to you comparing it to like what we think before going into a race situation, like we put so much time and effort into every little detail, and that's just usually one day or it's a couple hours of that day, but we put a lot of effort into kind of playing out the scenario and the plan B and the plan C. So yeah, I agree. I think implementing that into something like a holiday is
Totally.
great.
Yeah. And also a lot of self-compassion, I do want to say.
Self-compassion.
Yeah, and I think I mentioned it the last time I was on too, but especially during the holidays, again, we mentioned taking care of ourselves and just make sure that you're meeting your basic needs, because we can get so caught up in all the rigmarole that, take some time to think, am I sleeping? Am I eating? Did I skip meals? Do I need to move my body? Have I not? Do I need to go for a run? I'm really starting to feel like maybe that's what I need. And so taking the time to think, what do I need right now? Um, and again, coming from a place of curiosity and not judgment, and thinking, why you might have the feelings that you do. It can be very overwhelming. It could be due to unrealistic expectations. Maybe you need to readjust what you expect from the holidays, or start new traditions, because what you are currently doing is too much right now. And so it's a lot of assessing and thinking about what you want, and instead of, again, it's being that circuit breaker. That's kind of the buzzword, it's breaking that circuit instead of just going along with what you've been doing for years and years and years. Stop and reassess.
I'm going to go out on a limb here and say that being a registered dietitian also involves a lot of psychology.
Absolutely.
There seems to be a huge amount
Absolutely.
of relationship in the brain.
Absolutely. I mean, that's I'd say that's 98.2% of what I do is a nutrition therapist, basically, because it's oftentimes it's not about the food, it's so much, but it's a lot easier to make it about the food, right? And so we unravel that and start picking away layers and actually start, problem solving and getting deep in there. People come out the other end a lot more, feeling a lot more free, and it's really cool. It's really cool to see.
I bet it's incredibly rewarding too, for you to see these journeys. I want to get to maybe one more live question that we have from our live viewers, and then we are going to move into the after show with Maria. She's going to stick around for a little bit longer and give some of our GR crew members maybe a little bit more one-on-one advice as well. But let's get to one of these live questions.
Yeah, I have a question first, and then we'll get into the live question. So, our email inboxes are being bombarded with Black Friday deals right now, or pre-Black Friday deals. But also with those emails, we're probably getting a lot of last minute, sign up for this turkey trot, earn your pumpkin pie, or join us for this group run and burn the calories off before you indulge in your big dinner. When we're receiving information, or if we're seeing companies put this type of information out, do you encourage people, the public, us, whomever, to contact those companies to kind of say, hey, the message you're putting out there maybe isn't the right message? Or do you just stay away? You specifically as a professional in the industry.
I've done it in some cases, for sure, and that's totally up to how comfortable the person feels being that direct or being that assertive. I think that's awesome. I've definitely done it, and it depends on how triggering the wording was, or what they were insinuating by it. It depends on that. But yes, I've definitely done that. But I've also just blocked. I've also unsubscribed. I've also deleted all contact, because I cannot stand it. I cannot stand it. I cannot stand it. I cannot stand it. So I just get rid of it. I just get rid of it all.
I've been very close to forwarding you some things in the last week. I'm like, I just want to see what Maria thinks.
Just some ridiculous stuff. Just cut that out.
Sometimes you just have to laugh and be like, this is stupid, delete, this is dumb, delete, and just laugh it off, because it is ridiculous.
Let's get to the audience question.
Another question from Amber. Amber says, stress. How much can it affect us and our health? For example, regular workouts, constant moving for work, moderately healthy food intake, and struggling with weight loss.
Mm-hmm. And so the question is, how does it affect? Sorry.
How does stress play a role into kind of being healthy in the way of food intake?
I gotcha. So a lot of the times, especially people who eat in a restricted way or have certain guidelines or kind of rules that they follow. Oftentimes, it's the people who have those restricted behaviors. When they get stressed, that's when they turn to food for emotional reasons. Research has shown that people who don't restrict their foods actually do not turn to food as a coping mechanism. And so I think that turning to food for emotional reasons, there's nothing wrong with that. There's absolutely nothing wrong with that. There are far worse things that we could turn to be consoled or for comfort. My concern becomes when that's our only tool in our toolbox to use for coping and to use to help us with our stress. And so I encourage you to and especially during the holidays when stress is just elevated and things are going crazy, and maybe you have family over and maybe you don't get along with your sister or your brother, or and that awkward uncle is like, making you crazy. What can you do before you hit crisis mode? And so again, another exercise, I don't mean to be giving everybody homework, but just another exercise that I think is really good is coming up with some ways to be proactive rather than reactive. So, if you're traveling, if you're going home for the holidays, what's your favorite trail that you want to go run or walk on? Make note of that. Make a mixed CD, make some fun songs that make you feel good. Watch a comedy show, watch a holiday special, come up with a proactive list of things that you can do when time gets stressful. You can even call a friend and say, hey, I'm going over to my mom and dad's house. Can you be available between 7 and 9 in case I need to talk to you? So having a phone a friend option, or even bring a friend, drag them along, do something nice for them in return. But have a list of resources, of tools that you can use, you can go through, and by having that outlet, those resources, you are able to approach food and the decisions that you're making in a much more innate way, rather than from a place of stress or from desperation. I hope that answered the question.
I thought that was fantastic. I think it even adds some additional tools that we can just implement right now, like right away. It's fantastic. Again, our guest tonight, Maria Dalzot, has just dropped some amazing, helpful knowledge in regards to our stress approaching the holidays in our relationship with food, family, all that stuff that's happening. So I'm really, really happy with this episode. I'm going to go back and probably listen to it before Thursday. Maria, there are going to be a number of people who, again, same as the last time you were on our show, they're going to reach out. They're going to want to figure out, how can I get more Maria in my life? Like, how can I have her help me on a more one-on-one basis? Can you please let us know how we can find you?
Absolutely. You can go to my website, which is Maria Dalzot RD, which stands for registereddietitian.com, and there's a contact page. And like I said, if you sign up for my newsletter, I'll send you the JPEG that you can download to be on the background of your computer screen, with like tips and mantras and little fun things that you can keep in mind for the holidays, as well as a printable version. I'll get that out Tuesday or Wednesday of this week, and then I'll do it once a week, every week until the holidays are over. You can find me on Instagram at Maria Dalzot, and on Twitter, Maria Dalzot RD, and Maria Dalzot RD on Facebook as well. But I'm super easy to get hold of. I'll get right back to you. And just the outreach that I received after the first show was just, I again have no words. Like, it was just so special and meaningful, and probably one of the most meaningful things I've ever done in my career. So I want to thank you guys for sharing your platform with me to share something I'm so passionate about. So I can't thank you both enough.
It's our pleasure. I mean, seriously, You're educating so many people, and it is all very eye-opening and mind-blowing. It's all very good, positive self-health stuff, and I think the more episodes we get to do where we talk about this stuff, the better. We are going to have Maria join us in the after show right now. All you got to do is go to patreon.com/thegingerrunner for as little as $1 a month, a fraction of the cup of coffee. It goes to help support us and do this live show, our reviews, our films, everything. But you get access to all of the after shows, including tonight's, immediately following this episode. And the question that I'm going to ask Maria in that after show involves what happens when we do go too far with food. Inevitably, what if we eat too much pie or eat too much off that plate? How do we deal with that guilt? The guilt that's sort of like it's inevitable there. I'm going to ask Maria that in the after show, and I think we're going to get some pretty enlightening answers there. Again, a huge thank you to our guest tonight. We like to wrap up every show now by recognizing a member of our viewing audience, our GR crew, and our GR crew member of the week. We get to recognize someone that takes on something awesome, does something awesome, takes on a challenge, and just kicks major ass. Kim, who is our GR crew member of the week?
GR crew member of the week this week is Calvin Gillick. And Calvin says, new PRs for the 5K and half marathon distance for me. Not the times I was shooting for originally, but I did my best with what I was dealt, so I'm happy. Even better, during the same event, my sister completed her first 10K. Sweet. It's been wonderful to watch her joy of running grow this past year.
Congratulations, Calvin. Awesome to recognize you as our GR crew member of the week. Our wonderful guest tonight, Maria Dalzot. Go find her at mariadalzotrd.com. You can find out more information there. And again, Patreon supporters, you all get 20% off everything that she does, from consultations to full-on dietitian.
Nutrition
and running based coaching and all that. That's the word I was looking for, was the coaching side of things. She's fantastic, so highly recommend it, and it's a great 20% off coupon for all of our GR crew members.
Are we going to give that coupon in the
It's already there.
Oh,
it's already
okay.
in the post show description over on patreon.com/ginger runner. That sour beer is going straight to my tongue.
Very sour.
Am I forgetting anything?
I don't think so.
Gingermas is just around the corner. Middle of December, we're going to be doing Gingermas, where we like to get back to our community. We have a fun weekend of stuff planned. It's usually a big running scavenger hunt. People get to go out and collect points, and we give away tons of prizes. And this year is no different. So keep your eyes peeled on social for all the announcements around that.
And we have another big show scheduled for next week as well.
Yes.
We have Coach David Roach joining us next Monday, and possibly Megan if she's around as well.
We hope to get both of them. We're going to end the year on some high notes. We've got some great shows planned in the next 3 weeks before we go dark for the holidays. And you're not going to want to miss any of them. They're all going to be absolutely fantastic, just like tonight's show. Thanks, everyone. We'll see you in the after show. Otherwise, we'll see you next week. Get out there, train hard, race harder, and party the hardest. I know I am. See you guys next week.
Goodbye.
Bye.